Hi, everyone. My name is Asha Creary, and I am a licensed professional counselor and a licensed professional counselor approved supervisor in the state of Missouri. And we are back with another episode of Post-Grad with Asha. And today we are going to finish out section 5 of the NCE breakdown. So I know it's been a while since I've posted. Let me tell you how we got here, and then I promise I'm gonna make it short and sweet, and then we're gonna move into the content. In my mind, I fully recorded section 5 of the NCE breakdown, but clearly I didn't. JC sent me a message and was like, Asha, you know you're missing the second half of section 5. I was like, no, I'm not. Absolutely not. There's no way. He's like, yeah, you are. So I was. I apologize. I'm sorry, y'all. But then I re-recorded the video and sent it to JC, and guess what he said? Asha, you recorded the second half of section 3, so you got to do it again. Absolutely not. I did not. I did. So that's what took me so long. But I finally sat down with all the traveling, with all the business stuff, with all the holiday company parties, and I am finally giving y'all the second half of section 5. So let's jump into the content. So in the second half of the breakdown of the NCE for section 5, just a friendly reminder, section 5 covers the counselor's knowledge, skills, and abilities to conduct effective counseling. It is 30% of the test. It is 48 scored items. So just keep that in mind as you are preparing through section 5. It is the biggest section of the NCE. And also, before we jump into the content, I don't know if I had mentioned it in the previous video, but most of section 5 is going to be scenario based and it is going to be scripted. So when I say scripted, it's going to be a quote. For example, it'll give you a story or a scenario, and then it's going to say, how should the counselor respond if they are providing X, Y, and Z, such as empathy, reflecting, paraphrasing, challenging, or confronting. Is going to give you something like that. So the first thing, now that we're jumping back into it, is going to be to provide distance counseling for telemental health. So the clinician needs to know how to assess the client for telehealth fit, HIPAA rules, HIPAA compliance, confidentiality rules, how to treat a virtual space the same as a in-person brick and mortar space. Also, the counselor needs to be aware and be able to pick up on verbal and nonverbal cues that are present in the virtual space. So when you think about section X, do you know what it means to hold effective counseling over telehealth? Section Y, provide educational resources. So this can be over stress management, assertiveness training, divorce adjustments. So know when to provide resources to your clients. So based on what your clients need. For example, if you're working with a client who has substance use disorder, then you need to have some sort of one-pager or flyer or some type of information that you can provide to families who may have additional questions in regard to resources available to them for whatever it is that they're struggling with. The next part is provide psychoeducation for the client. So when you're working with a client, it is your job to provide psychoeducation around their diagnosis, biological or genetic components that may be impairing their mental health, using how to use their mental health benefits such as copays, deductibles. Now, it's probably not going to get into the nitty-gritty of copays, deductibles, and insurance, but that is still a part of psychoeducation as far as how to get their services covered, how to get their behavioral health services covered. The other part of that is going to be helping your client understand how their diagnosis affects how they make choices, how they engage socially, how their romantic or marital relationships or peer friendships, if they're kids, how their teacher-child dynamics, parent-child, peer-to-peer, colleague-to-colleague, how does your mental health overall impact you, and how does that show up in those different environments? The next thing is going to be section AA, summarize, helping your clients understand what you talked about during that therapeutic session is going to be very, very important. So a basic summarization of how to work with your clients, but also being aware of what a psychotherapy summary looks like if a client was to ask you to provide them with some sort of documentation for their progress in therapy. But typically you summarize as you're working with them in the session for the sake of the exam. The next thing is reframe and redirect. Do you know what that looks like? And are you able to reframe and redirect your clients and the concerns that they have in an ethical way without harming your client? Facilitate empathic responses. So what that means is, are you empathetic when you are responding to your clients when they're going through things? Also, you need to know what an empathetic response is and when it's necessary and when it's appropriate to implement or integrate that in the psychotherapy session. So 9 times out of 10, if you have a question over empathetic responses, it's probably going to be something where it's a scenario. Again, I mentioned earlier, section 5 is more so going to be your scenario-based questions. The next up is going to be use of self-disclosure. Now, in your program, they teach you never disclose to a client. I think that that's an extreme, right? Because your client, how else will you build trust if your clients don't get to know you in some aspect? Now, again, self-disclosure doesn't mean turning a client's session into your session. Self-disclosure is in regard to, one, to help build trust. So what is something that is going to aid in the therapeutic progress that requires self-disclosure? The other part of that is appropriate self-disclosure and making sure that when you are providing self-disclosure, you are not oversharing information. So if your client asks you, how did you handle a disagreement with your parents? You can just say, hey, like, I understand what you're going through. I understand how it could be hard. What do you think you want to do with the dynamic with your mom? I know what helped me. I might have done X, Y, and Z. Of course, you're going to give them the ethical response, not the toxic things that you did in response to whatever the dynamic was with your parent. So it's okay to self-disclose. So on the test, there's going to be questions regarding self-disclosure, and it's going to be something similar. It's going to be another case scenario if you do see something related to or regarding self-disclosure. Such as, what is an appropriate self-disclosure response to a client that blah, blah, blah. All right, next, use of constructive confrontation. So your clients already don't want to, well, not all. Let me rephrase that. Some clients don't want to be confronted. Some clients don't want to change, and again, let me fix that too. Some clients are not ready to change. Some clients are not ready to grow. Some clients are not ready to do the work, and some clients are not ready to reconfigure their cognitions about whatever said information or situation or dynamic there is out there. So you just want to be mindful of, what does it look like to use constructive confrontation and when is it appropriate to use it? So you keep hearing me say, what does it look like and when is it appropriate? You're going to get scenarios that's going to be very much so, what is this? What type of response is this? Was it appropriate? Is it appropriate? Or how should you respond based on whatever? All right, next up is facilitate awareness of the here and now interaction. So knowing how to pick up on the verbal and nonverbal cues, the leg shaking, the sweating, the diverting from conversations, the lack of eye contact, facilitating that. Hey, I noticed that you did X, Y, and Z. Did that make you feel some type of way? Or your leg is shaking. I noticed that you seem overwhelmed about that. So that's what that means. Facilitate resolution of interpersonal conflict. So when you have clients who have cognitive dissonance going on, or where they are really struggling with, like, should I do this? Should I not do this? Or it's me against me and I'm struggling with what I tell myself versus how I present in the world. Like, helping facilitate resolution around, like, okay, well, let's work through why you feel that way about yourself. Let's work through what that looks like for you if you were to lean into X, Y, and Z. So just being aware of what that could sound like or what that could look like is going to help you on the test. The next up is using linking and blocking in a group context. So what that means is knowing when to link group members' scenarios or situations, and knowing when to not allow those links or those connected. So linking and blocking is exactly what it sounds like in a group context. So if you've ever ran a group, and if you've never run a group, I'm sorry, that's unfortunate. But if you are running a group, you should have come across situations that required you to block something, and you should have come across scenarios where you connected two member experiences together to help facilitate the progress of the group. Management of group leader and member dynamics. So you should be aware of the group roles and what that looks like. So if you're not familiar with group roles, if you're not familiar with group norms, it is important for you to go back and learn what those group norms and group roles look like based on what you were taught in undergrad. And if you don't have a book or a little one-pager, go online and search for group leader roles, psychotherapy, and something should pop up for you. Maybe even a one-pager PDF should pop up. Model giving and receiving of feedback. So asking for feedback. Hey, how was our session last time? Do you feel like I addressed your concerns? Giving feedback. Hey, I noticed that you struggle with this. Maybe you should try this. Or hey, I noticed that we're not in alignment with what you're trying to do. So let's come up with some feedback, or I'm going to give you feedback on how we can change this situation so that we can help get you to where you need to go. Address impact of extended families. So how does extended families impact the overall family unit or the individual client that you're working with? So knowing what that looks like, knowing what the family roles are, knowing scapegoat, helper, and all the different family dynamic roles, being familiar with that, but also knowing the impacts that extended families have on an individual person, such as blended families, such as the various cultures within two family dynamics, and how does that impact your client. So again, these are going to be scenario-based situations. Contain and manage intense feelings. So when your client comes in dysregulated, there may be questions on, hey, your client came in overwhelmed, disgruntled, angry, irritable, and hyperventilating. What should you do next as a clinician? That's what that looks like. So contain and manage intense feelings. Or even mid-session, your client, it resurfaces a memory or an experience, and now you have to help them contain that emotion and manage it in the moment. The next, because you can't send your client out in crisis. Now, if they come in crisis and it takes a while and it takes a couple of sessions to get them out of crisis, that's different. But if you have a client that it's a one-time situation and it's mid-session and it comes up, your job is to help them compartmentalize, help them manage, and help them identify what those emotions are doing to them and how they are actually experiencing them. Okay, so next up is explore the influence of the family origin, patterns, and themes. So again, that goes back to extended family. So if you're working with an individual on family-related issues when it comes to extended families and regular, like in nuclear families, you're going to start to see how these two things are interconnected. So if you understand how extended families impact an individual, you should be able to understand the family origin and patterns and themes. So just being aware of how to identify and understand that. The next step is to address the impact of social support network. So does your client have a social network? Do they feel alone? Do they know how to access those resources? Do they know who they have that they can lean on and rely on? So helping your client resource their support network and what that could look like for them. Use structured activities. So some of your clients need non-directive therapeutic experiences, and some of your clients need directive therapeutic experiences. So that's where those structured activities come into play. Now, structured activities, again, may look different for each client, but on your test, there may be something that will, I ain't gonna say this question could just be more so related to children, but it'll probably be a question that will be a case scenario that's gonna ask you, what should be your next set of activities working with the client that came in with these symptoms that is now in X phase of the therapeutic experience? Next up is to promote and encourage interactions among group members. So your job is to make sure that your group members are establishing a group norm. So that is done through developing interactions amongst each other, hopefully healthy ones. Now, we know sometimes clients can monopolize groups, but for the sake of this bullet point underneath section 5, your job is to just encourage and facilitate relationships amongst, or interactions, not relationships, interactions amongst the group members. The next step is going to be promote and encourage interactions with the group leaders. So again, if you're the group leader, your job is to make sure that the group members are taking heed to the information that you're sharing and are engaged and encouraged to join their own growth and progress in group. Next up, use psychoeducation as a part of the group process. So again, knowing when to educate clients about their symptoms, the signs that they're experiencing, how to navigate those and how to manage those, and even how to get resources in relation to the symptoms that they experience, and psychoeducation around diet, genetics, all the things. That is your job, even in group. So if you realize the second half, or the second bottom part, these last couple of bullet points that we're going through is related to group. There are a lot of group questions on the NCE. There's a lot of group questions on the NCE, but that's neither here nor there. All right. The next up is explain phases in the group process. So again, when you're looking up group roles and group dynamics, you're going to want to look up group phases. Now, again, I'm not going to get into that in this video. I will do some other mini videos later on down the line, breaking down a variation of things. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to keep it very basic. Identify and discuss group themes and patterns. Are you familiar with what is happening within these groups, and what patterns do you see present? Next up is create intervention based on the stage of group development, which means that your job is to make sure that you change and manage group development with your clients. And then the next up is challenge harmful group behaviors. So when someone is being negative or harmful within the group, your job is to make sure that you are essentially protecting the rest of the group members, and you are making sure that those members are good, like making sure that if there are harmful behaviors present, whether it's amongst group members or whether it's like a behavior that is occurring outside a group that is funneling into the actual group therapeutic experience, your job is to challenge that. And then the last bullet point of this subsection for section 5 is going to be address the potential interaction of members outside of the group. So if you have members that are engaging in relationships or other dynamics outside of therapy, your job is to make sure that you support them in remaining in neutral dynamic relationships. So making sure that your clients are not building relationships amongst each other outside of the group, and how harmful that could potentially be to the group progress. If you've ever volunteered or did practicum, or even just know some awareness of residential treatment facilities or even substance use facilities, one of their main modalities of making sure that clients have their needs met is going to be group. And a lot of times what you'll notice is when you're working in residential or treatment facilities, what they tell you is make sure that your clients are not leaving as friends when they leave out, because it could be detrimental to their progress. So just keep that in mind. So again, for section 5, again, I'm so sorry it took me so long to get this video out. Just FYI, all the other videos are recorded. We were really just waiting on this video that I clearly messed up, but here we are. And again, for section 5, think scenario. What does this look like in practice? How did this show up in practicum? So as you're going through that NCE content outline, come up with some things to help you remember what to look for and what that could possibly look like for yourself when you're out here providing services in the future. And again, on the test, a lot of your questions are going to be scenario based for section 5. I know I said that like 6 times, but I just want to make sure y'all understand it. This client came in, they did this, how would you respond or how would you handle this? And it'll give you like a list of behavioral responses or a list of steps that you should take as a clinician to make sure that that client is able to do whatever it is the question is asking them to do or move forward in. So again, I'm so sorry. Thank y'all for being patient with me. The rest of the videos are done. We are really just waiting on this video. So hopefully the next couple of videos will go up much sooner. And y'all, shout out to JC because he made sure that I corrected it and got it together. So I corrected it and got it together. So you guys should be good to go from here on out. Thank you guys and see you next time.